Hi everyone, I'm Nikita and I'm from Surat. I'll be presenting today's module. This will be the continuation of the module that we did today, business plan. We have other members right now, Sara, Smith, Vedika, Nikita, Victoria and Priyanshi. So let's start with today's topic. Can you change the slide please? Also remember to follow the Zoom etiquettes. Unmute yourself if you have any questions or doubts, and if possible then please keep your videos on so that this can be an interactive session. Okay, so today's topic is personal management. This term is also known as staffing, which is basically concerned with putting the right people at the right job. So we know that staffing begins with human resource planning and includes other functions like recruitment, selection, training, development, promotions, performance appraisals, and performance appraisals of the staff. Staffing is important because we need to put the right people at right place according to their capabilities and abilities. Enough for the introduction. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we know that what is staffing. Let's go to the importance of staffing. Why is staffing important? Firstly, maximum and efficient utilization of resources. We can obviously not put other resources to work by themselves, can we? So, the human is essentially considered responsible for effective utilization of latest technology, material, capital, as they cannot be put to use by themselves. Human can only ensure the proper utilization of these resources by putting them to a right place. Second, reduction of cost of production. We also know that a well-trained person can well manage the operations of a poorly chosen can well manage the operations, while a poorly chosen staff can create hassles in the production and increase the cost. For example, if you choose someone who keeps on making mistakes or put a person at a job for which he is not suitable for, then he will keep on doing mistakes and mishandling things, hence by increasing your cost. So that's not we want to do it. We want to reduce the cost however it is possible. Third, job satisfaction. Job satisfaction is basically an individual's emotional response to his or her current job. So, like, try imagining yourself at a job where you're just putting in your efforts, but you are not happy or mentally satisfied. Will that be fair or not? Training and development are good ways of developing job satisfaction amongst the employees. You can also appraise their performance again and again so that they are satisfied with what they do. Fourth, for meeting present and future needs of employees. See, staffing helps us to understand what are the future needs of employees. If we fulfill the future needs of employees, then they'll be working for a long time in our organization, and thus help us by fulfilling the future needs of our organization. Hence, their future needs need to be kept in mind. Next point is for maintaining coordination among the employees. Staffing or personnel management ensures that both human resource and material resource go in the same direction. Okay, so assume that you have started a company. Like you need to put the resources in the same direction for better management and better control. So only human can do that. That way we can ensure coordination among the employees. I think importance of staffing is done. If anyone has any questions by now, they can unmute themselves or ask in the chat box.
More details about staffing and how to employ people and how people are a resource and asset to a company will be covered in our human resource module. So we have planned every module to make sure businesses everything about a business and commerce and entrepreneurship is covered in these sessions. So please make sure you attend every question. And also, if you have any questions regarding staffing right now, please go ahead. I'm sure Nikita, is more than capable of handling any questions you give at her.
Uh, I don't think we have any questions, or do we? So if we don't have any questions, let's start with our breakout room. Uh, the first thing you'll have to do here is think of a basic organization. And okay, we have a question. Is it advisable to employ friends in the initial phase of startup? Yeah, it is advisable if they are capable enough and if they have the expertise, then you can for sure employ your friends at a startup, because that way it will be a nice partnership and you know each other very well. So the coordination will also be great. Is that clear? And if they are capable enough to handle it, then I think you should go for employing your friends or family members in a startup rather than some strangers.
I would like to add to that point. It's not necessary that you have to, it's better for you if you employ your friends or family or someone in your close circle in your company or in your organization. Personally, I've worked with many of my colleagues, my friends, my peers who have made me proud and who have also let me down sometimes. So it's not always necessary that have to employ your friends. It's on the need basis. What they can provide for you at an organization, what are their skills, and why do you need them for? If you don't need someone in your company, you shouldn't necessarily have them in your company. So it's demand and supply base. It's more or less like economics, but in terms of hiring people and also firing people when necessary. So it's a great question when you ask, like, is it advisable to employ friends? I would say if they are capable enough to handle the job, go ahead. Why not? If not, maybe think of someone else.
Yeah, I think that is appropriate. We don't have any more questions, so we should, yeah. Okay, so now we'll be sending you in breakout sessions. Assume that you have started a company, be it any basic industry, and you have to decide that how many people should you employ while starting a new company and on what basis. Like, just think of 2 or 3 people or as much as you need, like one for each department. And how will you separate them into different departments? So
So as soon as we divide you into groups, we as hosts and co-hosts of this meet will also aid you in, explaining the question better. So don't worry about the question itself and what you have to do. I think all of us will join each breakout room and let you guys know about what you have to do and, how to move about this particular breakout room question. I'll just divide you into breakout rooms in a second. Please join the accept my invitation which I've sent you.
I hope you're staying safe in Japan.
I hope I am too. I'm not sure.
Hello everyone, where are you from? I know Ruchit is from India, and I know Shuju, if I spelled it correct, is from Japan. Where are you from? Where are you guys from?
I'm from Indonesia. Hi.
I wanted to come to Indonesia since a long time. Is Bali in Indonesia?
Yes, it is.
Oh yeah, I wanted to visit there.
It's on an island in Bali, and actually, Bali has open tick. their tourism again. They
Right,
closed it
right
off for a
now?
while. Now it's open.
Okay. If we can have Branis Joshua, please tell us where is he from?
I'm from Nairobi.
Oh, Nairobi.
Kenya.
That's okay. Kenya. I heard, I even wanted to go to Kenya. I went South Africa one day, like one time, but it's a bit
Yeah.
near to Kenya, I guess. Yeah. So we are going to discuss about how many people should you employ and what skills do they have or what do they need to do in their company as a startup. So let's think of a company and a product ourselves. Like what could be the company be doing about? Any ideas? Like it could be anything, like service based, product based, tech based, finance based.
So wait, so to pick a type of business to discuss about, or
No, let's just pick a business to, understand that where do we need to employ. If it's a
okay.
service based industry, then I think more people would be employed because if there's something, more people are going to do the stuff. And if it's like product based or you have to just manufacture stuff, you can also, have robots and machinery do half of the things which people would do. So maybe we should begin, where or what the company should be, like what should it do and what are its offerings to understand better how and how many people we could employ. And this question is a bit tricky, if it's a startup, it's not necessary to have 15-20 people in a company. Like this company where I'm sitting right now, it's my brother's office. They only have 3 people and they are 1 year into its existence. Everything's going right now. They just reached their break-even point and still they have 3 people. So it's not necessary to have 10-15 different people working on different parts of the company. But if there is a need, for different jobs, there has to be. For example, let's take the example of Entrepreneurs Tech. We have 19 people surprisingly in this entire project working on different modules because there are so many topics. We need 5 different groups with 5 to 7 different members, which is why I had to recruit as many hosts and co-hosts as possible. So maybe let's think about a company which offers a product or a service, and then let's move to the question.
What does your brother's company do that you're at the office for?
My brother's company makes games, like wooden games, classic board games. The aim of my brother's company is to, help young kids and individuals drive away from social media and screen time. Basically, they're helping them to be and learn from the real world using traditional games which we had a few years back. Right now, all of us, including myself, stays online a lot and is not being active in the sense of social activeness and also learning new stuff hands-on, like going out and learning it. So basically, it develops many games you might or might not know about. Like there are brochures and everything all around me. There's too much wood. It's not sustainable.
But that's really nice. That's like a really nice thing to have in an age where everything's like digital and
Yeah. But how does it work with only 3 people though? Like who makes the parts for the games and what are the 3 roles that the employees play?
So this company, it's not a company basically, it's a partnership. A partnership between my 2 brothers. I'm just here for, consultancy basis. I just tell them, like advise them everything which they do. Those 2 are the partners, 50-50%, and the third is the employee who handles the logistics, like picking up stuff and delivering the games and everything else. Right now, they are primarily selling games and all the other services on Amazon, which is why they had, reached the break-even point. But the core part of this business is the subscription services which they are going to offer. So if you buy the subscription from this company, which is known as Fisomi, they'll send you around 2 to 3 games every week, and you can, you get to play new games every week. So they collect the games again from you and they send you out new games. But right now, due to COVID, it's not really good to have these transactions. So we have stopped the subscription services, but we are only selling it online. You ask how does it work with 3 people only? So one of my brother, my first cousin, handles everything from outreach and designing of the games. Uh, Other brother works with the logistics parts of it with the employee, like picking up stuff and everything else, like how to gain more buyers from Amazon and the tech stuff, the tech side of the things.
Mm-hmm.
If you want, we can pick up this particular example, like this company itself, and maybe come up with things which maybe come up with number of people they need to employ in here, because right now things are moving pretty slow due to COVID. Like we don't sell a lot of stuff after we reach the break even point. Do we need to employ more people for that? Maybe not. What do you guys think? And if we do need employees, what would they do?
I was going to say maybe you need someone to hire other people. Like you need to hire someone to hire other people. But of course, like you want to know, like maybe you want to do that yourself if it's your own company. I'm not sure.
Right now, the need I feel for this company is they do need employees, like 1 or 2 more, but not so much as to it would be 15 of them or 30 of them. They need to work on the number of games that they produce. So they need to gather in the creative minds from all around the world. If not the Surat city itself, like I'm from Surat. So right now they only have like 75 to 100 games on board, and 10 of them they produce themselves, and other games they buy it from other sellers. So one part they might need to work on is having the sheer number of games, like more games to of themselves, like they could patent it and create something of their own, like entirely from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
Or they can adopt other games and maybe make some complications in it. So one part is that, so they could employ 1 or 2 people who solely focus on the content creation part of it. Like you only focus on the games, we'll be working on selling it to other people, like sales and marketing and everything else. I don't think this company requires any other details about any other employees. I'm gonna join another breakout room because I think they need my help. And if you guys want, you can take up this company or something else and maybe think about what other things we might need to employ. As I said, this also needs to be a sustainable business. It uses a lot of wood, which is not a good sign these days. So maybe think about having a chief sustainable officer or something.
Okay, does anyone else want to talk? Let me listen.
Does anyone have?
Hi, did you guys call me? Like,
Yeah, so we
yeah.
discussed. So we according to us that there should be three major like employees. One for the manufacturing department, the other one for the branding one, and the last one for the sales.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. Um, what sorts of company are you looking for? If you are talking about manufacturing, right? So you won't have any services in your company, only products. So what I've did in the other group, which I was a part of, I told them, think about a company, like create a company of your own, whether it would sell products or provide services, because it's entirely two different concepts. If you provide services, you may need to employ more people. If you develop new products and have factories and manufacturing, then more machinery is required there, not number of people. So maybe think about that, and whether you are wanting to work in service sector or the products part of it.
So suppose we are rebranding something and selling it, like we are getting it from the wholesaler or something. So I was watching the show on Netflix. So they also had this 3-person theory. It was basically a website for, I'm talking about a service. So it was a website who was selling stuff. So one person was the coder or the maker of the website, and
Yeah.
then one was the logistics guy who used to transport stuff and send it, and one was the CEO or the face of the company who used to strategize and uh, take note of
Think
all
about the
the business
future.
transactions. Yeah.
Yeah. So it completely makes sense. It was a service-based industry, right? You don't need so many people to keep everything together, to make stuff, to pack stuff. In this company where I'm sitting right now, they only have 3 employees and they handle everything. One of them is an employee and 2 of them are partners, 50-50%. And they do everything. They are in a product-based, industry. They produce hundreds of games and sell them online. So
So this is a gaming warehouse, I guess.
yes, it's a gaming warehouse. I have games all around me. This is some card game, Blink. They're
Okay.
developing some new games. I don't know what's it called. I haven't been here in ages, only for these sessions because it has good internet connection.
That looks very promising.
Yeah, it is. If you want to know about it, I'll let you know, after this session is done. I have lots of things to talk about anyway. So I think what Vedhi talked about, or any one of you talked, I'm sorry if I didn't hear it correct, about manufacturing. So you are thinking about, moving into the product side of things because you need to employ some people for the to handle the machines and everything else. So maybe there may be some expertise in that particular field, which is why you need that people. And there may be some CEO or something who's the mastermind behind all of this project and all the company. Like I am of ED. So think about the future and everything else, like the strategy, how to improve, appraise yourself, and things of that sorts.
In the initial days, I think we, like, as a startup, people have to do everything themselves, like do the sales and do the marketing and do everything. So
Yeah.
I was like reading somewhere that in the initial days only 2 people are required to run a company. More than two is like a like commune. Like then if there are more than 2 people, then there would be difference of opinions, and
Yeah.
then there would be like disagreements and all, which is detrimental for a company in the initial stage. Like
That perfectly makes sense. If you are starting up, it's not necessary for you to have the number of people.
yeah,
It's necessary for you to take decisions, to just move on, like go and decide things and, keep your product or services in the market. So it may be the case that you have to do everything by yourself, and it's not necessary always to have more people.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
makes
even a
sense.
single person company is detrimental, because if you don't have a difference of opinion and a different viewpoint of things, then it's very like you won't be able to take decisions rationally. You would always go
Yeah.
with your gut feeling. And unless and until there's someone who shares a vision, you can't just go on advising with random people asking that, yeah, should I do this or shall I not?
Yeah, it would make the decision making process a bit difficult. Not a bit, but a lot difficult. Okay, I'm giving you guys 60 more seconds to talk about this, and I'll see you back in the main room. Please do feel free to share whatever you guys have discussed and what we have discussed together. Thank you, guys.
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
Hello, how was your breakout rooms? Each and every one of you. I was a part of 2 breakout rooms and I helped them by thinking about this company itself, like where I'm sitting right now. So it's pretty nice.
We just had 4 members, like, of ED itself. So at first it was not that good, but then we had one more member, so we discussed.
Yeah, no problem. They might have, few more seconds to join back. So let's see what's up next. I think everyone from the breakout rooms has joined the main room.
Yeah, okay.
Please go ahead, Nikita.
Okay, so welcome back everyone. Can we talk about the discussion in the breakout sessions? You can feel free to unmute yourself and tell us about what you talked.
So I am Projit, and we were discussing in our breakout room what is that ideal number which we need to run a company in the initial basis. In my opinion, it should be two partners and one employee. By two partners, in the initial days, you can't just think about profits and what you are investing into a company, be it your skill or your funds, as it is you are bootstrapping yourself. But in the case of so two partners would make sure that there's no difference of opinion, like there's a healthy discussion regarding the company in the decision side of things, whether they should introduce this product or not, shall they increase sales in this region or not. But the third person, the employee, he is supposed to do the physical side of things, be it contacting the wholesalers from where they would pick up the product, or to the custom shopkeepers where they would sell the product, or to the customers if it's a service-based company, pitching them the idea. So basically, one person is the face of the company, other person is the handling the logistics and all those kind of things, and the third person is basically the developing the product side of things, I guess.
Okay, thank you so much, Projit. That was really great.
Yeah, it completely makes sense, Project. You talked about if it's a startup, it's not necessary for you to have so many employees at one place. I think we talked about the similar thing in your group when I was a part of it. So thank you for sharing.
In our group, if I can speak, in our group we were discussing, okay, Smith, is that how you say your name? Okay, his brother's company, and his brother's company has two partners, his brothers, and then one employee. And so we were discussing about how it's not always necessary to have a lot of people in your company. So they only have 3. So then we started discussing, should they hire more people? So our group kind of went to the discussion of, well, should your goal be to eventually not be part of the operations of the business? Should you eventually get to basically the management and you not involve yourself in the operations? And if that is the goal, then his company should be hiring more people, because currently his brothers who own the company are doing the logistics and the operations and the building of the game. So that's what our group discussed.
Wow, that was like correct. Do we have someone else to speak? Or should we continue?
Yeah, guys, feel free to unmute yourselves and speak, or perhaps add whatever you talked about in the chat box and we'll discuss about that.
Okay, so moving on. Now let's build upon the points for hiring people in a startup. Like all of you said that we should not hire many people. This point is related with our first point, overstaffing and understaffing. Overstaffing is basically a situation where a company employs more people than it requires. So when more people are employed, there are many problems that we need to face. For example, providing extra salary to the employees and hassles in work, as many people would be working on the same thing, right? So it is not advisable to employ more people than they are actually required. Understaffing is a situation when a company does not have enough employees to do its work properly. It is obvious that if we don't have enough people to work, then we will face delays in the operations, and also current employees will be burdened to finish all the work, and that's not a good situation either. Therefore, it is like very important to understand what kind of work you are into and how many people do you require to finish the task. Like it is advisable not to employ too many people, but it is advisable even not to understaff, because that will create a lot of burden on the employees. The second point is internship. Internship is a very good way of hiring people at low costs. We know that interns are usually not paid very high, so that they can reduce costs, introduce fresh talent as they have like just graduated or something. And we can also improve our brand value in other universities if we approach them for interns. And we can like if not on permanent basis, interns can take up short term projects, and this way we can go into many short term projects and complete that through interns at a very low cost. Our third point is training and its dual objective. Again, this point is also concerned with saving the cost from our point of view, and learning objective from the point of view of the employees. There are many students who would like to work alongside studies, not with the motive of earning something in particular, but like just to gain some knowledge for their future and their future. So we can look at those students and we can employ them, and they'll even be trained and we'll get them at low cost. So that is the way you can hire people at startups. Does anyone have any doubt about this, about the hiring strategies?
Shall I
Feel
speak?
free to mute yourself and ask.
Yeah, go ahead, Projit.
So I wanted to ask, as it is a startup, like people should be mentally prepared that it's more burden than a regular product based or than a regular company, which is huge and firm, as they have different rules provided. So what is the opinion that shall we compensate a person properly, as saying that you have to be like on the roll call for a long time, like you would have uh, you would have abnormal working hours and all, or it's just that we should rather refrain from doing so. Like if people are taking up a job, they should know the uh, odds of what they are getting into.
Yeah, I think you should let them know. Plus, when you join a new organization, you yourself are very enthusiastic about working. So I feel that people already know that they'll have to work, and that's why they are joining it for learning. So I think you should let them know their particular hours of work. You should clarify that mainly. And
Projit,
if some
did you ask these questions in terms of job security, or did Nikita answer the right answer, the thing which you
It was
expected?
actually unclear. I was asking that normally in a working hour situation, people work for 8 hours, but in case of a startup, it may take time, and as if it's a bootstrap startup or and a very small one, in fact, then the company they presume that the person is willing to devote more hours into the work, like more than 12 hours. Like they want the employees also to hustle the same way as they do. So it is even advisable if they are compensated well.
That is a great analysis that you made here, Projit. You are correct in saying that, yeah, startups generally do require the employees to work longer than the traditional working hours. But again, I believe that is something that they need to communicate before they hire them, right? Since they are going to be tight on cash and will be operating on a smaller budget, they are supposed to inform their employees very well that they are a startup and they might not be able to fund them properly. So the incentive for employees working in a startup mostly is experience instead of pay, right? So again, under a normal company, the motivation or the incentive for an employee is salary or pay. But in the case of a startup, generally the people that join or the people that you hire join in so that they can learn, right? So they do not exactly expect you to pay them according to the market norms. And of course, if you will be making someone work for more than what is the stipulated or the require or the normal working hour, you are supposed to let them know and have them and just keep them mentally prepared for the kind of work that they are being hired for. That makes sense.
Thanks.
Yeah, also I think that we talked about overstaffing and understaffing. So there we need to know that we should have enough employees to work, so that not particularly on the interns or the new employed people, but also on everyone. It has a great effect, I guess, if they are allotted a lot of work.
Nikita, we have a new
Another
question
question.
from Vivan in the chat. If you would
Are
answer that, please.
interns a good choice for startup as they would be inexperienced and new to the field? Okay, so interns, I think that interns are a uh, good choice for startups, mainly because they have just graduated and they know more about like they know the concepts, and we can teach them, and they can like if a person is experienced, he has the same line that he has been following through it, and we can, for example, say we can mold them our way and get them to work our way. And also they can be great for startups because they can introduce new things, new ideas, and work upon different fields altogether, whereas an experienced person has particular expectations about his pay and regarding the working hours he has. So I think interns will be flexible in that point of view.
All right. Building on what Nikita just said, Vivan, again, the idea, okay, all right. I believe hiring an internships in the beginning when you're just starting out is a better option, A, because it saves you money. Above all, if you're working on a tight budget, you are supposed to save as much as you can and be as resourceful as possible. All right. And as far as your point for as far as your argument that they're inexperienced, it is true that they are inexperienced, but we are not advising you to hire just anyone. For instance, if let's say you hire a marketing intern, right? This intern can be, let's say, a newly graduated business student, all right, or maybe a business student in his or her penultimate year or second year of college. So they do have some knowledge, they have the expertise, and again, their incentive to work for you would be to boost their resume and to gain experience. So they won't be expecting you to pay them well, and they'll also be ready to put in the kind of work you'd require, since they're joining your job to learn what working is like, since you will be their mentor in the kind of work ethic that they're supposed to develop as professionals, right? As professionals in their career after they work for you, they will not expect you to pay that much, and I'm pretty sure they would work harder than any other uh, traditional employee that you'd hire on a traditional pay scale with traditional working hours. So they'll go above and beyond for your company if you're able to motivate them the right way, and if they find the job that you provide fulfilling. So that again is a big part. You need to keep your employees motivated, which is something we'll cover further in today's presentation. Over to you, Nikita. I hope that answers your question, Ivan.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next topic is how to promote job opportunities as a new venture for cheap. Like when you are a new startup, you cannot spend money on finding people. So there are two ways: offline advertising and online advertising. This is pretty simple, I guess. Offline advertising includes flyers, pamphlets, and mouth-to-mouth conversations, and telling people that you need people to employ. So offline advertisement is pretty easy, and the cost is not very high too. Companies that have successfully used offline advertising for recruiting people are Swiggy, Shopclues, etc. As they need people for delivery and that stuff. So we can employ non-professionals through offline or offline advertising very easily. The next is online advertising. Online advertising includes publishing engaging content on social media using job platforms like LinkedIn, Freelancer, Monster.com, etc. These platforms contain huge companies that can offer you jobs. For example, Google, Spotify, WeWork, etc. And they are pretty much clear about what kind of job it is, and so you can easily recruit professionals through these sites and jobs. Next slide, please. Okay, so the next topic is employee motivation. I'll ask you a little question here. What kind of motivation would you seek as an employee? This could range from any amenities or facilities that you want, or your expectation of the work environment. Like you can uh, talk about anything. So like you have 1 minute to respond in the chat box or unmute yourself and
Like we get appreciation, like when we do something for the company which is good, the boss or like your head of the department praises you for what you have done.
okay, yeah, that's good. Someone else?
In my opinion, if a person is used according to his skill sets at what he's best at or she's best at, that is the ultimate. That's the most motivating of all. As in many companies, people sideline the skill sets people have and rather give them unnecessary tasks which they're supposed to do just because they get paid.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think we should move further on this topic. Employee motivation.
Nikita,
Yeah.
Prisha has sent something on the chat box. If you could call
Learning
that.
or pay wages. I said that apart from wages, what do you expect your company to do so? Wanting to improve their skills and becoming more good at it, yeah, for sure. Everyone wants to be trained and developed when they are joining at any company. Okay, so what is employee motivation? As the word itself suggests, these are ways to motivate employees. Employee motivation, that is methods of motivating employees, is an intrinsic and internal drive to put forth the necessary efforts and actions towards the work related activities. The term is pretty simple. Now, there are two ways to motivate employees: monetary and non-monetary. Monetary, as the word suggests, includes value, includes money value that are provided to the employees apart from their regular salary or wages. For example, bonuses, stock options. Stock options are basically you provide them a part of the stocks in your company. Now, non-monetary does not have any explicit money value, but it has much greater impact on a person than money can ever have. Like all of you said about learning and work appraisal and everything. So, few examples are status, job security, etc. That can boost the confidence of the employees about working at your company. Next slide, please.
I'm so sorry, guys. Our guest speaker is here, so we'd like to move on to the guest speaker part of this presentation right now. We'll let you know about the presentation after the speaker has done with her speech and the questions we prepared for her.
Right. So the guest speaker that we have here is Mrs. Sneha Dalmia. Mrs. Sneha Dalmia is the owner of the very renowned Desserts and More Bakery. She's a successful businesswoman who truly achieved her dreams and has been an inspiration to many. Her hard work and determination has successfully molded the business and her personal qualities into a recognized one. She is a truly ambitious woman and perfectly balances out her professional and personal life. Yeah, so we have the guest speaker here. Hello, ma'am.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, everybody.
Yeah. So let's start off with you briefing about your company. That would be great.
So yes, we are into an FMCG services wherein we are the manufacturers, retail sellers, and wholesale sellers as well. And this company is approximately 16 years old. We started as I basically started as a home baker, and slowly, gradually seeing the market scenario and everything, we grew to where we are today. So today we have a professional manufacturing unit from where we supply to wholesale markets, as well as we have our own retail outlets, and we also supply to restaurants, cafes, and different cinema theaters everywhere.
Right, that's great to hear how you've evolved from a home baker to a very recognized platform. So, what kind of what kind of products does your business offer, and what is your USP, the unique selling point of your business according to you?
So we are into bakery patisserie, which includes breads, then cakes, pastries, chocolates, everything that basically can be covered under the section of bakery. So, and our USP when it comes to bakery is we are completely an eggless unit, and we believe a lot in customization. That has been like from the day one been our forte, that we customize not only the kind of product that you need, but the look of the product, the size of the product. So these are the two things that we are playing the game with.
Okay, yeah, that's very fascinating to hear how you're able to manage each customized product. Right. So, what type of business structure does your company follow, and why did you decide to do so?
So initially, when I started as a home baker, it was a sole proprietorship firm, and slowly, gradually, as we are today here at this level, we are a private limited company. And as we started with no investment, and our investments today are have been are like we after selling and revenue generations, we have reinvested the same amount to our business till date. Particular market, when we started initially, we started catering to restaurants and cafes. As when Cafe Coffee Day had come to Surat, we were the sole food suppliers to Cafe Coffee Day as a local vendor. But slowly, gradually, like we started getting appreciation in the local market, and that's how we decided to get into retails. Then and thereafter, we did not ever have we never had a target consumer. In fact, every consumer who approached to us, we catered to his requirement, and they became our consumers. So that is how we molded ourselves as per the need of the market.
Right. Yeah. So we can conclude that it depends from industry to industry as to what kind of target market a business wants to select.
Yes.
Yeah. So would you like to throw some light on the type of business plan you have adopted?
Our business plan evolves around our motto. That is, the customer should smile at the last bite of the food that we've served to the customer. So as I told you, customization, like we try to execute all our orders perfectly, whether it comes to taste, or it comes to the looks or the size of the product. And wherever we feel the customer is unsatisfied, or there is some flaw in execution, we try to get to the base of the line, and we start working on it, getting it to perfection. So that is how our business plan works around that particular motto of our work.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty accurate. So I would like to request all the participants to kindly turn off your videos, as it would be very encouraging for the guest speaker and the hosts as well. Yeah, that would be great. Right. So moving on. So we know how important is it to keep our staff motivated in a certain business. How did you manage to keep your staff motivated? If you could share your experience on the importance of personnel management.
Yes, as I started as a home baker, I always understood the importance of manpower in an organization. That's the biggest asset, I assume. So we always consider them as the backbone of our work. And that is how their involvement into day-to-day decisions, their involvement in like basically their decisions, their behavior, everything is accepted and then corrected on our level as humans. Not like we have never even given them that basic, there's no restrictions to their actions. Whenever we have felt that some action has gone against our work or any sobriety of our brand, that is where we've corrected them. So we have one-to-one sessions with our staff as into how to deal with customers, how to understand the requirements, since we are into customization. So there is a lot of requirement to get into the in-depth of the requirement of the customer and what are they talking all about. Like supposingly if somebody comes for a birthday cake for their daughter or their son or their child, it's something very personal to them because it's that wow factor that they're looking in for that product from us.
Right.
So in like, when it comes to cost decisions, costing decisions, when it comes to product decisions, everywhere we have our team of staff who sits with us and make decisions so that they feel that oneness with their brand and the work.
Yeah, that's true. And so we recently had an activity with our participants as to what is the ideal number of employees that a business should adopt when starting their own business. So if you'd like to share something on that as well.
See, I personally feel every business is a very individual business, and it's very different from the other one. So there can never be an ideal number of people. Like our business require a lot of skilled labor as well as unskilled labors.
Right.
It is very less of machine work. Machines are required only where they are required, but rest every piece of our work requires that personal touch from people. So we have good number of people employed at the front desk, wherein they are dealing directly with the consumers. Then we have a lot of people who are at the backside in the factory end, where they are giving those personal touch to the requirement of the customers, and even at the execution end, we have good amount of people. So it depends from industry to industry. Supposingly, if we would have minus this quotient of customization from our motto, we would probably have much less number of people employed because machines would do their job then. So it depends on the kind of organization that you are working with and what is your motto in that organization.
Yeah, that's a big factor to consider for any business. And yeah, so moving on, what type of market research did you follow and how did it impact your business plan altogether?
So initially when we started, we came across a lot of requirement of an eggless bakery in Surat, because 14 years back when so Surat did not have any bakery which was individually an eggless bakery. They were serving cakes with eggs and eggless both. And there was a huge market potential for eggless, as it is a Jain community, which is like the predominantly Jain people were there. Plus the people who were around above 40-45 were very rigid onto eating cakes from the bakery who were serving eggs and eggless both. So that was one thing that we figured out, and we started working on that. And we got ourselves attached to quite many institutions, religious as well as non-religious, which gave a lot of faith to those people regarding us being honest about what we were promising them to be.
Right, yeah.
So that was first thing that we spotted and we started working. And then second thing that we realized that there was a lot of variety missing from the market. Variety in terms of bakery. Variety and customization both. People were the bakeries then were offering what they were offering. There was nothing called made to order. So that was the second throw that we gave in the market. And since those times, initially when there was nobody, we could capture the market. We could get that faith of the people, which is still working on our brand and giving us success.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's very true. So you said that you were initially a home baker and you started off your business as a sole proprietor. Yeah. And as in when your business started evolving, you turned into a private limited company and eventually into a partnership firm, I assume. So how was that journey different from you being a sole proprietor into a private limited company, being in a partnership, and which one would you suggest?
See, sole proprietors has its own benefits. Like you are the owner of your work, you are the king of your life. when it comes to business, when you're a sole proprietor, you can modify yourself, your modules, everything. So, but that has a limited sphere to grow because you are single, or basically that one brain is working to expand that business and contract that business. So when when we grew to a private limited company, we had more prospect to grow. Definitely it is difficult because then there is no sole say of you yourself in the business. There are a lot of brains who are working to get it where it is, and you have to listen to them whether it's good or bad. But see, every style of business has its own pluses and minuses. But for me, I feel if you want to grow, you have to involve more people in it. You have to come across more challenges. So for me, if at all your scope of growth is like limited, that you want to grow limited, you want to give limited time, you want to give limited effort, sole proprietorship is the best. But yes, if you want to go beyond that, definitely a limited firm is a good option.
Right. So if a business person aims to grow and grow and grow, then it is advisable for them to turn into a company or any other such of business organization rather than sole proprietor, because the reach there is restriction to the growth there when it comes to sole proprietorship, right?
Of course, yes. And even the government policies when it comes to that, in case if I want to grow out of Surat or out of Gujarat for that matter, or maybe out of India, I want to be international. In that case, I need to at least have a company. So it is like for my future growth and everything, if initial from day one, if I have plans, it is going to work easier.
Yeah, that's true. So I think now we can take on to some questions from our participants. Yeah, so Projit says that if I were to start a home chef kind of a startup, what tips would you suggest in the initial days of that startup?
See, first of all, hi, good luck to your thought, what you're thinking. It's a very brilliant thing because food is such something that's never going to go out of fashion and out of requirement. And second thing, one tip that I would want you to give is, first of all, understand the requirement of a customer who is approaching to you for their orders. Try and understand it in depth and try to satisfy the customer as much as possible, because in this particular line, word of mouth is the biggest way that is going to publicize you and your work.
Right. So how people perceive of a business impacts really on the growth of the business. So word of mouth is, yeah, definitely. And we have another question. How did you adapt to the pandemic situation, considering restaurants and cafe were closed? Did you revert back to your initial clientele?
Yes, we reverted to each and everybody on our contact list. We went back to them via WhatsApp messages and social media, telling them that we were giving door-to-door services so that we could sustain the manpower that we were holding back at the factory and at the counter. And we touchwood got good response from the people, because as I told you, that faith that people had developed in us really worked during these times as well. They were sure of our being genuine and our being very conscious about the food that we were preparing for them.
Right. Yeah, that's very important, because gaining credibility and trust in such situation is a challenging work for any business person.
Yeah, but we were lucky enough. Plus, Surat being a place where people, it's a reachable station, so that is also a lot plus point for us when it comes to our work.
Yeah, definitely. Sanyam says that how many staff did you hire in your initial days, and how did you increase the number of staff as per the demand of your product?
Yeah, so initially we had 3 people working for us. So one was the person who used to initially I only took orders because, as I told you, I wanted to understand the in-depth requirement of the customer. So I had 3 people working at the as back staff who would help me clean up, who would help me baking and everything. And then as per the requirement of our business, as it grew, we kept multiplying people. There was a point when we had exponentially a lot of staff. when we were still exploring different markets. We were exploring number of franchisees, multiple franchisee module and everything. And then we realized that in the kind of business that we are in, which is completely customization, the multiple stores does not give so much of success. So then we again curtailed to it, and then we reduced the stuff. So it's always a trial and error to the kind of business that you are opting for.
Right, yeah. I hope that answers your question. Another question we have is how did you adapt to the technology development over the years as your business evolved?
So yes, technically we had to be very sound, and we had to be updated always. For that, either myself, I'm supported by my husband completely in this work. So he's technically strong. He was technically strong already, but yes, we on an average we do some of the other classes that help us to grow technically with the times, and we also hire people when we fail to do the same.
Right. Yeah, so it is also important for to keep updating the business plan as the business evolves, so that all the various stakeholders are aware of that, with maybe technological development or the expansion of the business.
Yes, of course. I believe that technically you have to move with times if you want to stay in the business in today's time with the kind of competitions that are creeping in. If you stagnate yourself, you're out of the market.
Yeah, that's true. We have another question from Vivan. How do you face competition in your field? As I'm pretty sure you would be facing lots of competition, and how do you cope up with that?
See, competitions are something that makes you better if you take it very positively, because that is where you have to update yourself and you have to speed up that updation in case if there are times when you just want to slow down, you just want to stay where you are because that's your comfort zone. But as you see a competitor coming up, that is where you have to get up with your own mottos of the business that you initially started with. And competitors definitely make you better. Competitors definitely make you competent to the market.
Right. So competitors give businesses an incentive to grow and be more productive, which eventually is for the betterment of that business itself. Right. So I think Brandis is how we pronounce. Asks if you do plan to go international, there are some other different violations and community guidelines since you're targeting a different demographic. How would you apply that in the employment status of your growing business?
So probably that's still not in consideration to go international in coming 4 to 5 years. And since like the rules and regulations keep changing over a smaller period of time when it comes to food, because food is a very sensitive matter. So once we are sure of going international, we would be able to answer this question. I'm sorry for now for that.
No, that's completely okay. And since your unique selling proposition of selling eggless products, it also matters to the location that you're planning to expand. Because India being a Jain and eggless concentrated community, it would be better for growth of your business rather than expanding internationally where the demand could potentially be low.
Not really. I have a different thought to the same, because people are getting a lot of awareness regarding being vegan and being going vegetarian. So that's quite and catering to the market outside. I don't think we need to cover up the whole market to be successful. Even if we cover up 4 to 5% of any market in one particular country, that's more than enough to cover up.
Okay, yeah, I love how you turned the situation into a very positive way.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I don't think you have any other questions. If there's any piece of advice that you'd like to give, that would be great.
Only one piece of advice to all of you at this stage is that first of all, I would wish good luck to each one of you for your future. You're at a very sensitive points in your life. And second thing, only one thing that has kept me alive till date is positivity. It simply works miracles. Wherever you are, whatever you are, if you can positively look at the situation, you can turn it to your side. Otherwise, the best of situations can become worse for you.
I completely agree with what Mrs. Sneha said, because once I had an experience with lizards and more back
few years ago when the cake was not proper, but she came into the picture with her positivity. She helped us get the cake remade in like within hours and make sure that the delivery was done properly. So I think the positivity does help her business a lot.
Yeah,
Thank you for
that's
sharing
true.
the experience. It's really motivating for us to get such feedbacks.
Ms. Dalmi, I would really like to thank you so much for coming today and sharing your insights with with all of us today. There's one final question from Projit. He says that is there any way he can reach out to you because he would love your input on some of his ideas?
I don't mind. So either I can share my number with Priyanshi, or Priyanshi can pass on my number to him as well. It's not a problem, and I can whatever way I can help him, I would love to do that.
Right. And emails are also a good platform for communication if that's something that you're comfortable with.
I'm okay with anything. Just inform me. I'll be there.
Sure, sure. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your valuable and precious time. It was great. It was very insightful.
Thank you for giving me this platform to interact with you all young, beautiful faces. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, Smith, can we please go to the next slide?
Okay, so last thing we learned about was employee motivation, and Ms. Neha did a very good interactive session about how do we keep the employees and how do we treat them and how important they are for us. Okay, so now we'll take a case study of Google. Uh, Especially to me, the pictures on this slide are quite very attractive. Okay, so the first thing Google does is offering on-site services. Day-to-day services are available to employees for free at Google, like car wash, dry cleaning, meals thrice a day, massage therapy, hospitals, gyms, hairstylists, etc. So it's like at Google, if you work at Google, like while you're working, you feel like you feel tired or something, you can just go and jump into the swimming pool, or you can just go or take a nap. They have all these facilities for their employees. The second thing is unconventional office designs. Some office designs really tense me out or like create a stressful work environment. So office designs with amazing themes to make people feel like home and create a free working environment is something that Google is practicing right now. Each of their offices is really creative and they have put their best architectures to design it. Third thing is fun as a regular aspect of work. There are plenty of opportunities at Googlers to get out of their office and interact with other people present there. Facilities like wall climbing, beach volleyball day, pajamas day, dress up days, Halloween costume parties, and even April Fools Day are celebrated at Google. How cool is that, right? I mean, celebrating April Fool's Day at your office or just wearing pajamas and going to your office, right? Fourth thing is inspiring work. Google encourages people to take up their own projects and provides resources for the same. We have all heard that Google in every way provides resources to people for their personal projects, like the ones that they want to take. Yeah, exactly. Google is a dream for sure. Okay, next slide, please. The most important thing is voice and value. Employee recognition is highly important at Google. Google forums are hosted every Friday, and the employees are regularly surveyed about their managers. Moreover, they welcome feedbacks 24/7 through various communication platforms. Like if you're facing a problem, you can report it to them 24/7. And the thing is that they are known to resolve it within a week and like tell you about how you should work out with that problem. Next is transparency. Google is a company that considers people to be its biggest asset. and so they share everything that can be shared in order to maintain trust and honesty amongst employees. Google chairmen share with all the Googlers practically the same information that they share with board of directors. So for example, you are working in a company and you don't know about its operations or the decisions that are taken, you'll be really upset. Like you won't feel like you're a part of it. But Google does that. Google tells them everything that they should know so that they feel like they are part of the family. The next thing is freedom. The firm allows each of its employees to give 20% of his working hour to doing anything that they like. This can range from assisting in other projects or to even sleeping or just playing any sports in its premise. As we already saw that there are many sports available. So Google has this 20% policy. For example, you have 7 days working. So one day will be provided to you for doing whatever activities you like, or 20% of your working hours you can utilize it. To doing anything. You can just nap in their offices. There are especially nap offices there. You can play games. You can continue anything you like to do alongside. Also that they provide so many resources that, for example, if you want to start a dream project, but as for now you are considering doing a job, so you can work for your dream project alongside Google in Google offices. Also they provide you cars to like travel and everything. They provide you health insurance. One more thing that I find very fascinating about Google is that if some employee dies unfortunately while working at Google, Google provides 10 years of salary to their family. So yeah, that's a really nice thing that Google does for their employees. Okay, so outcomes of employee motivation culture at Google. We saw how Google motivates its employees. So now look at the outcomes of using these motivation techniques. First thing is more innovative products. Google's work culture and environments triggers maximum creativity out of people. So like we know that Gmail and Google Suggest are two of really important features that Google has. And there's no hidden fact that Gmail users are around 425 million today, and the company is earning a great profit. But who created Gmail? Gmail was created by a Google employee during the 20% time that he was given for free, or like the 20% policy worked out really great for Google. Even Google Suggest was created by an employee in his free time. So see, just that 20% of time is now making millions of profits for Google. So in a way, employee motivation has turned out to be really positive for Google. Second is employees become more entrepreneurial. Google organizes its entire firm to support and cultivate unplanned entrepreneurial opportunities and innovation. The 20% policy has really turned out great in this area. There was this one engineer named Chad Tan who really benefited from this. He wanted to make world peace his motive. So he designed a course along with some Stanford, I don't know, sorry for this, like professors and everyone. So now that course is being taught, and it is worth really great. So looking upon all these facts, we believe that there is no person on this planet who wouldn't like to work for Google. Google spends more like 500 crores on these employee motivation techniques every year, but the outcomes availed are much greater than the costs spent. This is why Google receives one application every 15 seconds and does not have to go out and look for people. Next slide, please. So we know that not all startups have enough facilities to motivate employees like this, or not all startups can spend 500 crores to motivate employees, because that's so much out of budget. So the next thing we learn is how should you motivate employees on a tight budget. The first point is bond with employees as family and not just co-workers, because that will help to reduce any chances of potential disputes that are likely to happen in future. If you involve them as a part of your family and not just as co-workers who work with you, then you'll share a really great bond, and future disputes will be eliminated mostly. Transparency in the business operations, like Google does, you can also share vital information with the employees. This develops an environment of trust and honesty, and the employees will be willing to work for you really well. The next thing is maintain a positive work environment that ensures no stress and happiness all around, and like maintain positivity and maintain an environment that is free of disputes. Allow them to explore in their fields. You should allow your employees to take decisions and discover the area of their expertise and discover new things in the field that you have provided to them for working. Listen and consider their point of views. Consider the advice given by your employees as really valuable and appreciate them again and again for that advice. Like one of you said that it was really important to receive the work appraisal or performance appraisal. The last thing is be a good manager and a good person. Your personal behavior towards your employees can clearly affect them in a positive or a negative way, and can really have an impact on their job satisfaction and whether they will want to continue with you or not. So I think that's it. We have some like 1% improvement in improvement technique, employee motivation.
Smith, can you go back, please? Yeah. Okay. So hi guys, I'm Sarah. Thank you so much for being so attentive and engaged this whole time. So before we wrap up our module, which is business plan, we just want to recap on some of the things we have learned over the past 2 days. So in our first session yesterday, we spoke about what a business plan was, which we said it was just a written document containing all your business goals, strategies, and the means in which you're going to go about attaining these goals are perceived to be achieved. We then also mentioned the primary parts of these business plans, which were things such as the business concept, the marketplace, and the financial section. And we put a heavy emphasis on the financial section, since that's the section that investors and banks would like to see the most, as despite your business ideas being great, unless you have the finance to sustain those ideas, it's not really feasible. We then looked at the 7 key components of a business plan, which are listed before you, so I won't read them out again. But when you do get a copy of this presentation, you can go through that again and just refresh your memory. We then also spoke about target audience and how important knowing your target audience is, as those are the groups of consumers that you are targeting through market segmentation. And that's the set of consumers that are most likely to buy a product repeatedly. So knowing your target audience is essential, because if you don't know your target audience, you may as well not really make that much profit because you're advertising your product to the wrong customers, essentially. We also looked at the 5 different types of business plans, which again, the definitions will be in the presentation that's sent to you. But one thing we did mention was that although there are 5 different categories for these business plans, there's nothing stopping you from combining elements of these business plans together to make your own customized business plan, because at the end of the day, you need to make a business plan that fits your business and your purpose. So we only categorize these to understand them better, but you can completely use aspects of any business plan to suit your needs. We also then lastly looked at a business model, which was your company's plan for making profit. And as a case study, we looked at Kodak's failure versus Nike's success, which I'll repeat again is in the presentation. And then lastly, yesterday, we looked at something called the revenue model, which is a business's framework for the generation of finance. And for that, we solidified that information through the example of Red Bull's revenue stream. Smith, next slide, please. Thank you. So then we lastly yesterday looked at something called market research, which was very helpful for businesses to make informed decisions, as again, like I mentioned previously, understanding your market is key when it comes to the success of your business. So collecting and analyzing data is something that businesses do on a regular basis. It's essential for them to identify potential customers and their market through this. It helps them identify consumer needs and demands, and it's usually done through something called primary or secondary research techniques. So that can be like surveys, focus groups, interviews, social media, etc. We also looked at qualitative versus quantitative research methods and various online tools for market research, such as Google Alerts, Insights, etc. And then lastly, yesterday, we looked at something called the PESTLE analysis, which helps in determining external marketing factors. So that's just political, environmental, social, technological, legal, and I think ethical is the last one. And then we finished off today's module with looking at personal management, which is where we look into how businesses employ and assign jobs to their employees, and how online and offline advertising can help promote these jobs and ensure that they have a steady stream of potential employees to choose from. And also, it's just a cheaper way of promoting job opportunities, because at the end of the day, businesses would rather spend it on other ventures. And then lastly, we also looked at motivation, which is key to help the staff, work efficiently, work productively, and just enjoy what they're doing at the end of the day. Because if an employee does not enjoy their job, then they're probably not going to perform as well. So yeah. All right. And then Manav, do you want to take over from here?
We have many more modules for Entrepreneur's Deck, which cover various other aspects of running a business, which are Business 101, economics, finance and accounting, human resource, operations, marketing, sustainability, technology and innovation, business law and ethics, COVID-19 and business, etc. So I would highly recommend you guys to register for the upcoming modules, because Smith just reopened the registration yesterday. So feel free to register for whatever other modules you think you'll be interested in. And lastly, I'd like to thank you so much for being such a great audience and actively participating with us and engaging with our sessions yesterday as well as today. Feel free to share any feedback that you guys have, anything that you loved about us, something you'd like us to change. Just feel free to unmute yourself and speak, or maybe add to the chat box. And thank you so much once again. And you'll receive a post-session email after this module. We highly recommend that you participate in the 3 or 4 questions that you shall be given in that email. And once again, feel free to share your feedback or send in any questions that you still might have at entrepreneursdeck@gmail.com. And again, if you want to connect with our guest speaker from today, Mrs. Dalmia, then we'll be happy to provide you her contact information. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much, Starjay.
Yeah, again, just to like repeat what Manav said, if any of y'all want to stay back for any questions, just unmute yourself and ask us, because I think we're like a smaller group now, so we can answer them easily. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining, and we hope to see you at some of our other modules.
I actually want to share the 1% improvement technique. So it was in the cycling foundation in the British. It was like since 110 years, nobody had won. And then they hired someone named Dave Brailsford, and he was a prefect, and he used the 1% improvement technique. In that, he used he enhanced the shoes so that he increased the comfort zone, and he made the beds more soft, and the shoes, they had extra comfort pads, and the cycling gears were made more comfortable. So in that way, he made the cyclists, like using this one technique, they won the France G Tour competition and they also won the Olympics that year. Like after 110 years, using that technique, 1% improvement technique, they did this.
Thank you so much for sharing, Vaidehi. That was truly insightful. I really hadn't heard about this before. Again, guys, I'd like to repeat, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. If you have anything else to share, something you'd like to, something that you already know about, or subtopics, a fun fact, anything at all, just feel free to speak up.